Talk Radio, The Forgotten Promise. I'm Jay Clifton Slater, I'm an author, and usually do the color commentary on the Veterans Talk Radio, Forgotten Promise. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you remember the phrase, Elvis has left the building. Well, do you remember hearing that? Before that, I heard it. Everybody, I think, here, it's one of the most famous lines of all times. Well, Elvis has left the building permanently in 1977. But today, Elvis's son, Michael, joins us. We'll introduce him in a minute. We met him on this show last December when he was in Las Vegas doing some shows and doing some things. Well, what we'd like to do is introduce him. And ladies and gentlemen, Michael has just entered the building.
Hey, how you guys doing today?
Michael Presley, welcome
Nice to meet you. Nice to see you.
The Forgotten Promise. Good to have you here. So, look, we posted the interview we did before in December. We posted it on our Facebook page on VTRC and on our YouTube channel as VTRC space USA. If you haven't been to our YouTube channel, go there, give it a listen. There's a bunch of shows up there. We're putting more up all the time. And if you have a veterans issue and you want to know more, we're going to have a video up there for you. And I think you're going to enjoy the way we deliver. It's not cut and dried, boring discussions. We have real discussions where we have a little humor, a little sadness. We just kind of get into it like that. So if you get a chance, go watch those shows because I think you're going to find it fun. I know I watched the one with Michael and RJ from last time. I got a kick out of a lot of things they were talking about.
That was a lot of fun.
So, yeah, it was. So we're going to try to do some things. We're going to try not to cover the same ground. We'll try a little different. Now, Michael, you have a book coming up, right?
We do. It's called In My Father's Footsteps. It is done. The editors right now are working through it. It's over 5,000 pages, and, of course, they're going to have to cut it down to be a bookshelf level. There will be an unabridged version available, but it will be more expensive than, of course, the bookshelf.
Of course, because I'm an author. I have.
And you know what we're talking about.
I have 37 books published.
Wow!
When you're waiting for the editing to come back, and then you have to go back over those again, the process can be excruciating.
And it really is for me because this is the first and only book I've ever written. I mean, so I'm not an accomplished writer. I just sat down and wrote what was in my mind and on my heart.
Yeah, and look into the camera again and tell the people what's the name of that book.
It's called In My Father's Footsteps.
There you go.
By Michael Presley.
By Michael Presley. I like it a lot.
And, of course, the entire book is carries me from prior to my parents being born, our history and lineage and the entire family as has never been told before. And then up to my birth and then all through my school years. And growing up and then living a life without my father and living the life with my father at the time, what little amount of time I had with him. And then right on up to today.
Good. Well, let's jump back a minute, if I could, and dig a little bit into you and a little bit into your book. What was it like growing up with your mom?
We were struggling. My mother struggled. I was the product of course, an illegitimate affair. They weren't married at the time, and back in the 1950s, that was a no-no. And
yes, it was.
It was an even bigger no-no in my family because, unbeknownst to all of you, the entire family on my mother's side were ministers.
Oh.
And that is all in the book, too, and some of them so big as to have established churches of Christ all over the African continent and including a Christian college over there. And there's a huge ministry that was done over there, with over in Africa back in the days. And so my grandfather was trying to become a deacon or an elder in the church, and this is not the Church of Latter-day Saints. That's not the Church of Christ we're talking about. This is the regular Church of Christ that believes in the Lord's Supper every Sunday and believes in non-instrumental music in the church worship service and things like that. We just do the hymnal. So he was trying to be that, and then along comes my mother, and my mother, of course, was an entertainer at the time. She was a big band singer with Les Brown's orchestra now and all that group.
Les Brown and his band of renown.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
she met my father, and they had this affair, and, you know, he wore my mother down, and she told me, she said he just had a way of getting underneath the girl's skin, because she was just adamant it would never work, and especially with her father and mother, because of them being so church-tied. And then, of course, my father being who he was in the 1950s, I mean, they were looking at him as the son of Satan, for all intents and purposes,
Well, yeah,
you know.
And that is the hard part for people to understand. You're dealing with an icon, somebody that I used to tell my kids when they were younger, they go, I want to be famous. I go, now, what level of fame do you want? You have Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson, you have the fame where you can't go to the mall or you can't go to the movie theaters because you get mobbed and you become the center of attention. You have no life that way. You're going to live in isolation. Now, it may be a gilded cage. You may be living really nice, but you're going to live in confinement because you cannot just get in your car and go to the grocery store.
Your life is not your own.
Yeah, your life is not your own anymore.
That's absolutely
there's
correct.
A level of fame. This is the other level of fame. I think Denzel Washington was talking to somebody about the difference. One of them was a TV actor. He said, I can go to the store and I can do this, I can do that. And Denzel says, yeah, you're a great character and you're a great actor. He said, but I'm a movie star. I can't go places. And that's the level of fame. So you're talking that kind of level of fame, focusing that energy on one person, it's got to be pretty amazing.
It is, and you know, and for my mother said, well, you know, I've got the baby, I'm not going to get rid of it. You know, this is going to be my child. I'll take care of it. I don't need you to raise our son.
Right.
You know, and she didn't want that life for me, and I was really very, very thankful for that in a lot of ways. Of course, I went under a long lineage of, you know, surnames that weren't even mine, but it was whoever my mother happened to be dating or was with at the time, you know, and things from the 1950s to the 1960s until she met my stepfather was very, very difficult. I mean, there were times there in my book that I depict, you know, issues there where, you know, she was eating the moldy bread and we got the good bread, and she ate onion sandwiches and we got bologna sandwiches, and she ate ketchup soup and we got the tomato soup.
You know, it's amazing. For a second about Elvis's fame, there's fame before the internet, right? Before people had, I have on my hip a mini computer. I call it a phone, but it's really a mini computer. I can look things up. I mean, this UFC fight tonight that I'm really interested in, UFC 300. I love.
You love wrestling?
I love mixed martial arts. I like fighting shows, UFC Ultimate Fighting Championship. But I looked up a name, and the next thing you know, I get a message from Facebook with more information on the fighter I was looking up. So I'm like, okay, Google is talking to Facebook, and so you get all the fame going on. Well, Elvis was famous before all of that.
That's true.
It's right. So speaking of Elvis, real quick, did you ever spend time with Gladys Presley, Elvis's mother? She passed 1958. You would have been a toddler.
I would have been a toddler. I did not, at least not that I know of. She was quite ill by the end of the 1950s, and my mother, of course, did have contact with her. I do know that. But as far as me going over there and spending time, you know, and being dropped off at Grandma's house and everything like that, her parents, my mother's parents, would probably have burnt the house down over that.
Yeah.
You know, because they were already still fuming with the fact that she had had this affair in the first place, and then and she was keeping the child, and of course we were not pro-abortion back in those days, and so she didn't want to get rid of her child, which I'm very thankful for that she took that upon her. But it was a complete, you know, life change for her, because she was an entertainer, and now she was quitting her entertainment life. She was quitting the world. She was being shunned by her parents, who later on began to accept, but they never fully accepted me.
Yeah, well, I can see that. So, sorry. So when did you actually learn that you were the son of Elvis Presley?
I had kind of known for an awful lot of years, because my mom always, Elvis music, was a main stable, but so were the classics and big band and a lot of other music.
Well, she was with Les Brown. She's going to have probably records from all that whole era.
Exactly. And of course, I enjoyed it all, but it always seemed to be there was something that just seemed to touch me when my father's voice was on the speakers. And it just seemed to go that way. And then when I got old enough to really start asking questions, the very first time I asked the question, well, who is my father? And my mother looked at me and she said, well, she says, that's a conversation we need to have eventually. But she said, does it really matter? Is that going to affect your life? Does it really matter? And I said, no, it doesn't really matter, Mom. I said, I love you and you're everything to me, and that's the way she was. She was mother and father. And then it went on a little longer, and now I'm a little older, and I finally decided I wanted to, get some kind of concrete proof. And my mother said, well, if you're really wanting to know who your father is, you need to go talk to my sisters, your aunts.
Ah.
And so I said, well, okay, I will. And the first conversation, I didn't really get very far with them. They just looked at me and said, oh, no, that's a conversation you and your mother I need to have. We're not getting involved in all that.
They closed the family door on
Right. Well, then it came up again a couple of years later, and they were coming to Southern California. I was still in school. They were coming to Southern California, and I couldn't wait till they got there because I knew that I would have them all there in one location, and we would be able to go ahead and press the point.
Press the point.
So I did. I just did exactly that. And my aunts were together, and we were having a conversation. And I said, aunties, who's my father? And the look on their faces was amazing because it was like somebody just sucked the air out of their lungs. It was, that came from so far left field, they never expected a question like that, okay? And because we've been talking about Disneyland and Knott's Berry Farm and all that kind of stuff. Exactly.
Out of the closet. Yeah.
And I remember looking at them, and they had this astonished look on their face, and they looked at each other like, who's going to speak first? And my one auntie looked at me and she says, well, I think we've had this conversation before. And I said, yes, auntie, we did, and I never got any answers. Well, what did your mother say? I said, my mother told me she needed to come talk to you. And then they all started to giggle and laugh and say, oh, I think that's a conversation you need to have with your mother. And then I said, well, Mom's not going to give me, Mom's not going to give me the conversation. You're not wanting to give me the conversation. I think it's fair to ask these things. At which point then my one aunt said, well, which father are you talking about? Now, that's something to say to a young man, what do you mean which father? And then the other auntie says, oh, come on now, how many were there? And then the other auntie said, well, I count 5 or 6. And then the other auntie goes, no, she was only married twice. Okay, well, all right, so who are these people? So in the process of all this, finally the one aunt speaks up and she says, well, she says, I'm going to leave it to you to handle this information, but I want you to know that your father was the most gifted man and God's gift to women, as sinful as he was. And I'm looking at him going, okay, and he became the richest entertainer the world had ever seen. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but God's gift to women and the richest entertainer of the whole world, it only can be one person, and that's...
And Margaret.
Yeah, right, and Margaret, there you go. It had to be Elvis Presley. Well, I went back to my mother and I said, I know who my father is. And she said, the aunties couldn't keep their mouths shut, could they? And I said, no, Mom. I said, they didn't actually come out and name his name, but I'm going to give you his name. And she looked at me and she said, well, Smarty Pants, do you know who it is? I said, yes, I do. My father's Elvis Presley. And she looked at me, and again, she said, yes, you are correct. Your father is Elvis. And then she said, but you have to understand, I needed to protect you. And I said, I get all that, Mom. And then she asked me again, she says, does it really matter? And I said, no, I guess it really doesn't matter at this point in my life.
When you think about it, the fame, everything about him drew photographers and cameras and microphones and again, some fame, but probably not a lot of money. So your life could not have been easy as a young man.
No, and it was very difficult, her keeping us secret.
Yeah.
because my father was looking for us. He was wanting to have a relationship with his son, and my mother was going, no, you can't do this because it's going to bring the press on, it's going to bring media attention on, and I don't want him involved in that. And so it was a great difficulty. And by the way, somebody had asked, who is his mother? My mother's name is Mary. So there you have it. It's in the book. A lot of the questions that were requested and asked on the comment section of the last video are going to be answered in the book. So if we don't answer it here, you'll get the answer in the book.
I like it. Listen, we've all seen the movies. We all heard the stories about Colonel Tom Parker controlling Elvis, controlling his schedule. And sometimes they say it was good because he took this boy from Memphis and helped him grow into a major a megastar. Other people say he was a controlling monster that stole from Elvis and ripped him off. I don't want to get into any of that, but what I do want to know is, because he did control Elvis's schedule, did they set aside some time for you?
My mother was the biggest obstacle to my father and I being together. When I turned...
It's not unusual, by the way, in divorce cases.
No, it's not.
Men's rights is a thing that a lot of people don't realize are a thing.
But she was the biggest obstacle. Although, as my life progressed and as I was growing up, my father was able to do things for me that my mother and stepfather were not able to do, and it made a big difference in my life. And after I found out who my father was, then of course it really fit in, because now I understand who one of his security people was, who would come from his dojo in Pasadena all the way to Southern California to teach me karate. And of course karate was something that my father studied all of his life.
That's right. Yeah.
And Ed Parker was that man. And by the way, in the book, I name names. I don't try to obscure names. Somebody said that they talked to so-and-so on the comments, and they didn't want to say anything to them because of their safety and this. Listen, folks, this is 2024. We're being transparent. The book is transparent. I name names, instances, dates, times, locations, pictures, documents to go along with everything that we're saying in the book.
It's 500 pages long.
Well, 5,000 pages.
5,000 pages.
That's why it's so long. And so that was one instance. Then my father decided, because I was in the choir, that because he kept track by contacting my mother and finding out how I was doing and this, that, and the other thing. And he found out I was doing quite well in choir. And he then sends Adrian Rosati, who had been taught by Mario Lanza's teacher, the art of bel canto singing.
Mario Lanza.
That's right.
He was a piano mover that sang opera.
That's correct.
And was discovered and turned into a worldwide phenomenon.
That's absolutely correct.
If it hadn't been for somebody hearing him sing while he was moving pianos, he would have never been.
He would never have had anything happen with him. And he was one of my father's favorite singers. He loved that. But they did, he taught bel canto form of singing, which is the big breasted tenor baritones that you see in all of the concert halls. And so,
especially if you've seen Phantom of the Opera, right?
That's correct.
That is definitely, the Phantom is definitely played by somebody with that ability to, come to me, sing to me.
Yes, that projection out there.
Yeah, the projection.
So although I had talent, my father sent somebody who would be able to help refine the talent and make it that much more sellable, much more workable, in case Michael decided he wanted to do something along those lines.
Ventured into the music industry.
And of course I did, barring my time that, of course, I served in the service,
You were Navy, right?
Navy, that's absolutely correct.
I was a Marine, so I want to thank you for giving us rides to very strange places.
Yes, we gave you rides and we fed you well. And
you patched me up?
Patched you up, absolutely.
That was good. Did a good job on that. And Corman did a good job on that one.
And by the way, somebody had also asked, they said, well, wait a minute. When did he serve and where did he serve? USS Sperry, out of San Diego.
What kind of ship was that?
That was a subtender. I was sub-designated when I went to nuclear power training school, and so I served aboard the USS Sperry, which was a subtender down out of San Diego. I also served aboard the USS Neosho out of Norfolk, Virginia, And of course that ship was a above surface oiler, and transported avgas and things along those lines.
Sure.
And because I had been trained in nuclear engineering, I was also trained in non-destructive testing, and we would do testing of the propellants and the petrols and different things like this to make sure there wasn't water in them, there wasn't byproducts in them, there was no extra things in them, things along those lines, so that the purity was maintained when it was being transported over to, and we would be underway transporting this oil and avgas over to the carriers and to the other ships to go ahead and provide them with the fuel and the requirements that they needed and fuel requirements.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize the logistic it takes to keep an aircraft carrier operational, because so many consumables on board.
Unbelievable.
The fuel for the vehicles, the fuel for the, even if it's a nuclear power vessel, they still have to feed the people. They still have to put energy and oil and things into the planes.
My phone's blowing up because they're watching the program.
They are?
Yes.
But that's going out. Can you pause that,
Well, actually,
can you deaden the sound there?
I think we probably could just,
Okay, that'd be
hold
good
on a
idea.
second. I'm
Only
just going to,
because people who do watch this later, especially, it will be on Facebook. By the way, Facebook is VTRC on Facebook, and on YouTube it's VTRC with a space USA, because VTRC is something to do with the Veterans Tech Center. So we may be animals, folks, but we are not officially veterinarians.
now I want to tell you too that somebody was asking, they said, well, where did he take his training? Orlando, Florida was boot camp. A school was in Great Lakes, Michigan, and Machinist Mate School was in Great Lakes, Michigan, and then out to Terminal Island for nuclear power preschool, and then on over to the Idaho Test Facility. And with naval programs, when you're working towards a degree, unlike a regular college, you are able to work pretty much at your own speed. If you want to get moving on with your career, you'll complete the classes in less time than it is required. The problem with doing that is it messes up their billeting program, because they have an open billet for a particular vessel or ship for you, or a command for you to do. And if you complete your training in a half or a quarter of the time because you're testing out of it or completing the classes and doing extra work all night long and burning the oil, what ends up happening is you complete the school quicker, and now you're not available to that billet because the billet was 6 months from now.
Yeah, they have nowhere to go.
They've got nowhere to put you, nowhere to go. So I did get my nuclear engineering degree with the United States Navy, and those are some of the locations that I served. And of course, there's others too, and some of them I cannot tell you about, only because it's not prudent, and to this day we were under certain ops and certain things that were going on. Which, by the way, also brings me to this point. A lot of people were saying, well, wait a minute, we thought that Vietnam War ended in 1969. Folks, it didn't end then. We were still pulling guys out of Cambodia and that area over there in the 1980s, early 1980s.
Exactly.
And we were running covert ops over there to get people out who wanted to get out. A lot of the guys that are listed as missing in action may not really be missing in action, in that they were embedded into the communities, took on families, had children, took jobs, and was providing intel information for the Department of Defense while they were in the Vietnam and that whole Pacific area.
There's a lot going on there. Hey,
Yeah,
listen,
absolutely.
you are listening to Veterans Talk, The Forgotten Promise, with Michael Presley. Listen, if you have a comment, you have something to say, please give us a call, 702-733-5968. That's 702-733-5968. Or toll free, anywhere, 800-414-1056. That's 800-414-1056. I left Vietnam in December 1969. So after 13 months in combat. So I understand a lot of what was going on. So let me see. I have notes, and I'm lost on my notes because I got so enthralled in what you were saying. We know Elvis was on, he went away to the to the Army.
That's correct.
Right? He did his bit in the Army, and I understand what I've read. They wanted him to go into special services and to do entertaining the troops, and he said, "No, I want to be a regular trooper." And
That's
a
correct.
regular soldier, and I understand he was if I remember right, he was a forward observer. He was a combat forward observer.
He did
right?
that. He also operated tanks and was a gunner in the tank too. And of course, there's photographs of a lot of this stuff. A lot of times when you're in the military, for people who are non-military personnel, you'll find out that military personnel, you may be listed as a one thing, a fire tech, but that doesn't mean that you only show up when there's fires on board ship. Okay, you may be painting bulkheads 1 week, and another week you might be changing gaskets in the steam system, and another week you might be doing something else. So we always filled lots of different jobs other than the one we were just trained in.
I know. I got to burn latrine bowls, so that was fun.
You were a poop burner.
I was in 0311 combat, but every once in a while they had special assignments for some special people, and apparently I was one of the special people.
No, well, you were. You're a special person.
So Elvis gets back from the Army. He goes on the Ed Sullivan Show, right? And I remember.
Actually, I think the Ed Sullivan Show was a little bit before that.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, the big one that really showed him after his return from the Army was Frank Sinatra. He did the Frank Sinatra Show, and when he appeared on the Frank Sinatra Show in his uniform, this was not the little boy that had been standing on the stages as a teenager and a young man, rocking and rolling in the 50s. This man that walked out onto the stage was a lean, mean fighting machine. The acne was gone. The little bit of weight that he carried as a young boy, because all young boys carry a little bit of weight, that was burnt off, I'm sure, in boot camp and on operations. And he was this lean, mean fighting machine, total black, jet-dyed hair, and walked out onto the stage, and in very much a Greek god walk, out onto the stage to reclaim his former career.
Isn't that amazing? So many people, one-hit wonders, people that come, they go, whatever, but they come back and they make that transition to the new person. It's like the phoenix rising from the ashes. They're going to do that. What I always found interesting was I love Elvis movies. All of Elvis's movies just are
great,
fabulous. And I mentioned Anne Margaret before. And you can only imagine. I can't remember which movie that was. She was in with.
Viva Las Vegas.
Viva Las Vegas. That was one of the best movies on so many levels. First of all, it shows you old Las Vegas. It shows you a lot of Anne Margaret, and it shows you a lot of Elvis Presley. But that was okay. No, but they did a deal that I hadn't realized, that they did an album for every movie he was in.
Not only did they do an album, but his contracts was slated for 3 movies a year, $1 million a movie. That was his take, not counting the production costs and everything like that. That's what his paycheck was to walk out the door. And that was a phenomenal schedule. I mean, 3 motion pictures a year, not to mention the fact that you've got a soundtrack to go with each one of those motion pictures. And every one of those pictures, if you ever notice when you watch them, some of them are a little cheesy and this, that, and the other thing.
It
and
makes them fun, actually.
That's exactly right. But they left you feeling good when all was said and done. You know, you never felt bad. Some movies today, they burn your brain synapses.
Well, interesting enough, Elvis in his movies played the anti-hero a lot of times. He played against type, right? He was the bad boy, or he was the troubled youth, or he was the guy that he had the big dreams, but he kept messing things up, so it wasn't working quite right. But not in a slapstick comic way, but in a very human way.
Yes.
You know, where's the money for the race car? It fell out of his pocket. It falls into the pool. By the way, I'm a real fan of Viva Las Vegas and Formula One racing. So Anne Margaret, Elvis Presley, Formula One racing, Las Vegas, Viva Las Vegas is one of my favorite movies.
Didn't they used to have that actual road race every year, the one that was featured in the movie?
They did.
And it went out to Boulder Dam and then came back.
Yeah. And then that was early days of road racing. And now it's the Formula One, which we have back in Las Vegas, which is completely different, but it's still a pretty amazing race.
Phenomenal race.
So we talked about movies. We talked about reinventing himself. And I'm kind of a tech geek in some ways. In 1973, the Honolulu International Center, capacity 6,000 people. Elvis did 2 or 3 shows there, and they beamed it live over the satellites. Nobody had ever done
To a large portion of the world, yes, they did.
This was anybody that's CNN, Ted Turner, about that time, had a small the TBS radio TV station in Atlanta, and he said, "I'm going to put the Braves games up on a satellite." And there was a debate in the FCC of whether a programming sent over the satellite was a broadcast or whether it was a common carrier. Common carrier simply meant it was a device that transferred information. And no matter what they sent, they wouldn't charge you for the actual use of it. You charge for the use of it, but not for the content. Well, Elvis, Colonel Tom Parker and Elvis and Ted Turner both said, you know what? We're going to put our stuff up on there, and we're going to chance that we're not going to owe billions of dollars for the use of the satellites, because as a broadcaster versus a common courier. Well, the FCC, came down, Federal Communications, the FCC came down on the side of it being a common courier, and so the satellites then became just a transmission device and not
like a mirror, a reflection.
Just sending out the information. So, but the Elvis concert was the first globally distributed satellite technology.
That was the start of MTV. Literally, that was the first real, music video, music presentation, phenomenal concert, all of those things wrapped up into one. YouTube, all of that was spawned literally from that program. Now, my father didn't know any of these things was going to come from that. It was just this was going to be the first program broadcasted around the world, and some air times they couldn't get it broadcasted because it was too early in the morning for fans to watch, and so they waited for the later broadcast. But for the most part of the rest of the world, they saw it all live as it happened.
Talk about MTV. One of the big bits on MTV was Unplugged, right? You get an artist and a big band. Usually it's a big band behind him, but it's the artist sitting down with his guitar, playing the guitar by himself, maybe electronics, maybe not. But I always go back to that Elvis in Hawaii, and I remember him sitting there in his leathers with his guitar, and you had that feeling like that was the start of Unplugged. Right?
And just an incredible person to go ahead and be the fourth runner, the guy that's the first one to go out and do it, because he was in phenomenal shape at the time. It looked great, sounded great. The entire presentation, all of the music there, the way it was produced. I mean, this is the way programs should be produced, with that kind of quality and that kind of leadership, on all levels of the program. Today we don't get a lot of that. We get a lot of secondary programming being done by a lot of programmers, but that was really top notch. It was the best that could be produced at that time, and my father went out there and knocked it into another universe, literally.
It was pretty amazing, and I think a lot of people forget the first. A lot of people forget the how he led things into becoming part of popular culture. Give me a second, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to Veterans Talk: The Forgotten Promise. If you have a comment, if you have agree, disagree, something we've said, please give us a call, 702-733-5968. Or toll free, 800-414-1056. So Elvis, early 70s, you were in the service, he was in service, I was in the service. What was your first interactions with your dad like?
Well, the very first interaction, of course, I was a child, and so you don't, I remember it, and my mother's told me about it, and you have that to bond with. The next time that I actually had an interaction with my father was in 1974, and I was Mr. Teen America. Yeah, I was Mr. Teen America. I had won a Mr. Teen contest out there in California that had been put on, and I got one on the talent section, believe it or not.
Wait, I have to ask, what was the talent?
Singing.
What a shocker. What song did you sing?
I don't remember. It was not an Elvis song.
It wasn't?
No, it was not an Elvis song.
No.
No, it was not. I think it was something like "We've Only Just Begun" or something along those lines.
Okay. All right, that makes
but,
sense.
which also was one of the songs that I sang at my graduation from high school. So I was a speaker for the graduation for high school, and also sang several songs at graduation. And it was kind of funny because when I started singing the very first year in choir, my teacher, Mr. Schreier, told me, "You think you can sing, don't you?" And I said, "I know I can sing." And he looked at me and says, "You can't sing. You'll never do anything singing." Well, they told my father that too. They did, on the Grand Ole Opry. He tried to be on the Grand Ole Opry, and the first time he was on there, they booed him and told him to get off, and the stage manager said, "Son, go back to driving a truck."
Not enough warble in that voice.
That's, I guess. So, I mean, I could think back, and I'd say to myself, my father was told that. And so it didn't dismay me, because every year I was right there, all through high school, right there in choir, and in stage production. So when it came time, I was the one that was selected to then give the presentation for the high school for our senior graduating class, and I did that. Well, that year also, my senior year, was the year that I won Mr. Teen America, and won a contract to perform in Las Vegas, Nevada, for a week. That was one of the That's one of the deals. And
what casino?
did you guys? Now you guys have been here a while.
Well, RJ has, and he's off camera today. So.
Remember the El Dorado?
Yep.
It was also called the Hacienda.
Hacienda, yeah.
It was also called, I believe, the Thunderbird. It had gone on by quite a few different names down there on the Strip, and that's where we performed.
Isn't that Town Center now?
I don't know.
It's not Town Center. RJ's shaking his head now. I don't know. I've been here since 2000, so the old Las Vegas people know a whole lot more about the city than I do.
But that was one of 3 casinos that we had worked at, and but we had done that week, and of course I was 18 years old. Now, you're not old enough to be on the casino floor. You can't be walking around the casino. Even though you're an adult, you can conduct yourself back and forth to your hotel room or to your suite, but you can't really do much of anything else. Okay? So I had done the whole week, and unbeknownst to me, my father was working on his opening night, which would be Monday, I believe it was the 19th of August, 1974. Oh. And that show has gone down on the media as the one show that my father did that was totally different than any other shows. And I'm here to tell you, I tell you about that show in detail and per song and why the songs were selected. It was like no other show my father ever did. He did not open with 2001 Space Odyssey. He did not open with C.C. Rider. He opened with Big Boss Man. Oh. And then he went into a bunch of songs that were not 1950 hits. They were not hits for him. These were songs he was beginning to release, which were a lot of ballads and things along those lines, very big orchestrated pieces, kind of like words from the Bee Gees.
Right. Yeah, they had a lot more orchestration. They had a lot more background singers.
That's absolutely correct.
Do you think that was because his audience had grown up with him? For instance, when you've got a 13, 14-year-old that just loves Elvis and they're screaming and they're fainting and they're throwing, you're going crazy. That person, a few years later, 15 years later, is now near 30, right? And they're looking at it, or 30 or older. Now they want something in life. Life is getting busy enough. They don't need the crazy of the teenage stuff. Now they want something a little more mature, something else they can sink their teeth into, something that relaxes them better. You think that's where he was going with this?
Well, he was going with it, but they were still wanting that rock and roll stuff from the 50s.
Oh, sure.
You know, because they want the Heartbreak Hotel, Hound Dog, All Shut Up, Don't Be Cruel, you know, Teddy Bear, all those kind of
All great
songs.
songs.
You know, and they were all great songs, but my father's was going in a different direction because he saw the writing on the wall. And he told me specifically, he says, I saw the writing on the wall with the Bee Gees. He said, music is changing. It's going in a whole different direction. My father had done a comeback when he came back from the service and became a different person than he was in the 1950s in 1960. Then he made his second comeback was in 1968 with the 68 comeback special. And everybody saw him, and he was different again. He wasn't the movie star anymore. He was this leather rock god person walking out there who was raw and uncontrolled and unharnessable and unpossessable, you know, and all the women in his life wanted to possess him, and that was one of the problems that he had with relationships, was because they wanted to possess the man and they couldn't possess the man because it was something that was unpossessable. And so here he is now, and he had done that comeback special. Well, in 1973, doing the Aloha from Hawaii show, realizing that, wow, we've got to start making changes. My father's music changed in 1974. And in 1974, he started doing these other songs. And I was there that night for that opening number because my show had just closed Saturday night. And he had come by to see me and had told me, I've already talked to your mother. You're coming over to the Hilton Hotel with me. You're spending the rest of the week. I looked at him and said, Dad, I can't. Mom's waiting for me. No, I've already talked to your mother. She says it's fine. You're 18 years of age now. There's nothing she really has to say about it. She can't control you any longer. And I've already taken the liberty to take all of your belongings from the hotel here and transfer them over to a room over at the International Hotel. Now, anybody who's ever known my father or known anything about my father, you just didn't say no to Elvis Presley.
That makes sense.
Okay, you just didn't tell him no. I mean, if you tried to tell him no, he'd look at you like, I don't think I can define the word no. Now, if you told him yes, he says, oh, I know what that means. It's, okay, we're down. We're going to go do it, see? And so I got transferred over there, and the show was incredible. The following night, he went back to 2001 Space Odyssey and CC Rider. But he told me, he says, I see the writing on the wall. We've got to do a comeback. He was scheduled to make that comeback in 1978. And, of course, we all know what happened in 77, and he was unable to complete that. And it's a shame because I think even now, at his age, when you think about all the artists that are as old as they are today, you know, with the advancements of geriatric medicine, if he could have survived and not had the heart attack, I think he would probably still be here rocking and rolling. I mean,
well, look, that generation grew up rough. They didn't have the nutrition we know about. They didn't know the nutritional. They didn't have the medicines we have. They didn't have the preventive medicines we have. And when you're working 2 nights a week and living back and forth between Vegas and somewhere else, and your life's not your own, we see
working
artists,
2 nights a week?
2-3 nights a week. What was it?
My father's shows ran 7 days a week.
7 days a week.
Oh yeah, 2 shows a night.
2 shows a night.
And sometimes 3 shows a night.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they had him tied down to a real residency contract. It was work. This was not playtime.
And that's my point. Look how many people actually, that hard work like that, as much as you enjoy your work, it will kill you.
It will take a toll on you.
Take a toll.
Absolutely.
Heck of a toll. And it probably did. So look, when do we have a release date for In My Father's Footsteps?
They have not given me one to release, but I know that it's coming. And as I said before, the book wasn't completed when I talked to you in December. It has since been completed. It is now in their hands. They're handling it, and they're working it out. But I can assure you, folks, you have no idea what is coming in this book. It scared people who were with the Memphis Mafia and the people in Memphis and EPE Enterprises and Priscilla Presley to the point that they offered me $2 million last year to not write the book.
To not write the book.
Take the money, go away, disappear, and never come back. Well, that's not me, and the reason is because there's been too many convoluted stories about my father. They've got him listed now as supposedly having an illicit affair with his mother, my grandmother Gladys, and that he was in a sexual relationship with her and slept in the same bed. Then they've got these other stories where he was supposedly keeping 14-year-old girls chained in his hotel rooms. None of that stuff is true. But the problem is young people today who didn't know my father, don't know what the truth are, can only hear the stories from these people who claim to be, quote-unquote, Elvis Presley experts. And I don't think anybody's an expert. I'm not an expert of Elvis Presley, and that was my father. Okay, I don't think anybody can be an expert of Elvis Presley. I don't care how long you were with him.
I tend to agree with that, and we also know that over time, people will do salacious rumors to get. Nowadays, it's called a click, right?
Oh, and it's money.
Click, and it's money for click. So the more outrageous you can accuse somebody of something, the worse it can sound. The more clicks you get, the more fame you get. I mean, we see that.
And
here's one thing we do know about Elvis Presley, and this is it. You named a number of his songs earlier. Now, I happen to know, I'm old, so I remember the songs. But I also know that if you think of the thousands of songs that have hit the top 50, top 10 over 30, 40 years, you name an Elvis Presley song and people go, that's an Elvis Presley song.
The minute you hear it.
The minute you hear it, you know. And when you name a bunch of Elvis Presley songs, nobody goes, oh, I don't know what that one is. No. Mon ami. Everybody knows every Elvis Presley song, from In the Ghetto to Blue Suede Shoes. You're there.
And believe it or not, the catalog amounts to over 1,000 songs.
Is it really? I never thought of adding them up.
Yes, all the songs from the movie years, all the songs from the 50s, all the songs that were released later on, all the material that was released later on, all the material that was released in the 70s. A phenomenal amount of music that my father either touched, recorded, and released, or did in a concert, but it was never recorded and released.
Interesting. I know you talked in the last show about a song written by Dolly Parton that Elvis was going to record. And I know I read the article by Dolly Parton about, what's the song? I Will Always Love You.
I Will Always Love You.
He wanted to record it, and she was a young songwriter, but she would have had to sign away her rights.
That's correct.
To have him record it. Now, she would have been living fat off the hog on royalties the rest of her life. But she likes, because she wanted to keep that song for herself, so she kept ownership of the song. And I can imagine that it would have been just a massive hit if Elvis had recorded.
It would have been, and it was for Whitney Houston.
Oh my
but
goodness, yeah.
You have to understand, and I know Dolly. She's from my part of Tennessee. Okay, hi Dolly, I love you, honey. She is great, fabulous career going right now with the new rock album and everything else.
How crazy that she was in the Super Bowl with Dallas Cowboy mini shorts on. Performing.
Oh, absolutely.
That was great.
Oh, she looked fabulous.
Somebody said, I heard an interview, I'm a Dolly Parton fan, and somebody said once, hey, how can you get away with the fake this and the fake that and the big hair? And she said, listen, honey, if there wasn't a Dolly Parton, somebody would have to invent it. So.
Exactly. And she's just, I mean, a phenomenal girl and a phenomenal person, and the song was phenomenal, but Dolly loved to hold on to the rights. These songs were more than just music. She didn't just write music. She wrote pieces of her life. And when you write pieces of your life, you don't want to release the control of that.
I'm a writer. I know exactly.
You know exactly what I'm saying.
Listen, we're going to run up on time here shortly, but right now, if you've got a question or comment, 702-733-5968. Or toll free from anywhere in the world, 800-414-1056. Listen, you're in town for we're having Michael Presley here. We're in town for the NAB. That's the
correct.
National Association of Broadcasters.
That's correct.
Been radio sales for a long time. So will you be doing an interview there?
We are going to be, we're going to be doing an interview there. We're also making a personal appearance there. We're doing a bunch of meet and greets. We're also doing a little mini meet and greet thing around Vegas. What you all don't know is last July we started with 100 viewers on a program called Bandstand Radio, and our show had 100 people, and they told me, they said, just try this out. And I said, well, I'm no radio broadcaster. They said, just give it a try. And so we now have 11 million plus subscribing listeners
Very nice.
on Wednesday night, 7 p.m. to whenever.
And what's that on?
And that's on bandstandradio.com. And you can get that through your Roku, MyTuner, Vima. I think it's also available on Stream, and there's a whole bunch of platforms it's available on.
Bandstandradio.com. Wednesday nights. What time on Wednesday nights?
7 p.m.
7 p.m.
Eastern Standard Time.
Eastern, so you can hear Michael there, which would be 4 o'clock here.
4 o'clock Vegas on the West
We're
Coast.
right up against the time. We want to thank you, Michael, for coming in.
Oh, you're very welcome. Oh, this has been a blast.
Now, folks, next week we have our 8th annual Pig Out fundraiser. Tickets are available on Eventbrite at VTRC or at our doorway. You can come on down and say hello and pay for your tickets. Please watch until the end. We're going to run our sponsors up on the screen.
I want to make a point too that we're also going to be meeting with a bunch of veterans that from this area, because I definitely, we wanted to do that last time, couldn't, and RJ has told me that they're going to make arrangements to do that, and I'm going to have a chance to meet and greet a bunch of veterans.
Good.
And I'm looking forward to meeting all you guys and girls.
Good. RJ, that's all, folks. You're going to put our sponsors up there for us, RJ? There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank Michael Presley for being here. Michael, I want to wish you a safe journey. I want to say hoorah. And Michael?
Go Navy!
Michael has left the building.
Amen.